Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Now, today we are going to discuss the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 16th February 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Now, let's start our today's discussion. Now, this news appears on page number 8. It says, why only bureaucrats on information panels? Ask Supreme Court. Appoint professionals from all walks of life. Court tells the government. Now, this topic on Right to Information Act becomes extremely important. As you can see, a question has been asked in the year 2018 itself in the mains examination. However, this particular question was asked in GS paper 4 on ethics, integrity, and aptitude. The question read, the Right to Information Act is not all about citizens' empowerment alone. It essentially redefines the concept of accountability. Discuss. So we understand that information commissions becomes extremely important not only from GS paper 2 perspective but also from GS paper 4 perspective. Now in your prelims examination, this topic of RTI forms a part of Indian polity and governance. Now this news highlights about the observation of Supreme Court information panels where the Supreme Court have noted about official bias in favor of bureaucrats and government employees. And this official bias is with respect to appointment as information commissioners or chief information commissioner in the Right to Information Commission. Now, the RTI Act 2005 says that the chief information commissioner as well as information commissioners shall be persons of eminence in public life with knowledge and experience in law, science and technology, social service, management, journalism, mass media or administration and governance. So it is here where the Supreme Court has highlighted their observation with respect to information panels where the Supreme Court has noted about official bias in favor of bureaucrats and government employees. As per the Supreme Court, appointment of government employees as information commissioners is evident from the very beginning of the process for appointment of chief information commissioners and information commissioners. Now RTI Act talks about constitution of Central Information Commission. It says that the government must constitute a body to be known as Central Information Commission to exercise powers conferred on and to perform functions assigned to it under the RTI Act. Further, it says that the Central Information Commission shall consist of the Chief Information Commissioner and such number of Central Information Commissioners not exceeding 10 as may be deemed necessary. Further, it says that the Chief Information Commissioner and information commissioners shall be appointed by the President on the recommendation of a committee consisting of the Prime Minister, who shall be the chairperson of the committee, leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, and a Union Cabinet Minister to be nominated by the Prime Minister. Now, the petitioners of this case argued that there was no rational criteria for shortlisting of candidates out of applications received. And according to the minutes uploaded by Department of Personnel and Training, which is the nodal department for RTI matters, also revealed that there was no rational criteria adopted to shortlist candidates out of applications received for the post of Information Commissioners and Chief Information Commissioner. Further, the petitioners argued that the selection committee even shortlisted those candidates who did not apply for the post of Information Commissioners and Chief Information Commissioner. So based on all these facts, the Supreme Court observed that this evidence of bias towards bureaucrats and government employees was evident from the very beginning of the process of appointment of the information commissioners and chief information commissioners. Supreme Court further noted that the selection committee which shortlist candidates for the appointment for the post is itself composed of government employees, hence the bias is quite visible. The Supreme Court further questioned the government that how government employees or retired bureaucrats have consistently been found more competent and suitable than other eminent persons from other walks of life. Now, this observation of Supreme Court becomes important because we know as per the RTI Act, it clearly says that the Chief Information Commissioner and Information Commissioners shall be persons of eminence in public life with wide knowledge and experience in the field of law, science and technology, social service, management, journalism, mass media, or administration and governance. So, not only administration and governance, but other persons of eminence in different walks of life must also be considered by the government. Thus, the Supreme Court has directed the government to look beyond bureaucrats and appoint professionals from all walks of life, including persons with wide knowledge and experience in different fields. Non-filling vacancy for the post of Information Commissioners and Chief Information Commissioner, the Supreme Court for the first time has put the government on a deadline with regards to filling the vacancies in the commission. And on this note, the Supreme Court has directed the government that the process of appointment should commence at least 1 or 2 months before the retirement of the officer is completed. So for the first time, Supreme Court has put the government on a deadline for filling posts in the commission, as there have been delay in filling the post for information commissioners as well as chief information commissioner. So this topic becomes important from a prelims perspective because we must know that the chief information commissioner and the information commissioners shall be persons of eminence in public life and can have wide knowledge and experience in different fields and cannot only be bureaucrats or government employees. So with this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 5. It says, Gaganyaan's review panel to meet in March. Indian Space Research Organization to share space mission details to stakeholders. Now this news highlights about Gaganyaan, which is an Indian human mission to space. And this Gaganyaan is very important because it is India's first manned mission to space. Now this topic of Gaganyaan in your prelims examination forms a part of general science and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 under technology. Now this topic of Gaganyaan becomes important because in the year 2017 a similar question was asked. The question was, India has achieved remarkable successes in unmanned space missions including the Chandrayaan and Mars orbiter mission, but has not ventured into manned space missions. So what are the main obstacles to launching a manned space mission, both in terms of technology as well as logistics? Examine critically. So we understand that a question has already been asked on the obstacles being faced by a manned space mission. So on this note as well, this topic of Gaganyaan becomes very crucial from our examination perspective. Now a National Review Committee on Gaganyaan is about to meet in early March to discuss in details about this Indian human mission to space. Further, a broad-based review committee having 100 scientists and experts shall also discuss every aspect of this Gaganyaan mission. In the process, this committee shall also be briefed on Lunar Lander and Rover mission as well as the Chandrayaan 2 mission. However, prior to this Gaganyaan mission, 2 unmanned trial flights with human capsules will be flown in the year 2020, which will carry a few microgravity experiments. It says that microgravity is the condition in which people or objects appear to be weightless. The effects of microgravity can be seen when astronauts and objects float in space. So prior to this Gaganyaan mission, 2 unmanned trial flights with human-friendly capsules will be flown in 2020, which will carry a few microgravity experiments. Now the Gaganyaan mission was announced on 15th August 2018 as a mark mission for the 75th year of India's independence that will take Indian astronauts to space. As already mentioned, that this spacecraft is being developed by Indian Space Research Organization, that is ISRO. It consists of a service module and a crew module and collectively is known as orbital module. Further, ISRO's GSLV Mark III, which is a 3-stage heavy lift launch vehicle, will be used to launch the Gaganyaan mission. So we can say that Gaganyaan is an Indian crewed orbital spacecraft mission which will send 3 astronauts to space for a minimum of 7 days as a part of Indian Human Spaceflight Program. And to achieve this Gaganyaan mission, ISRO has set up Human Space Flight Center to implement this mission. The Human Space Flight Center shall be responsible for implementing Gaganyaan project, which involves end-to-end mission planning, development of engineering systems for the crew survival in space, crew selection and training, and will also pursue activities for sustained human space flight missions. So on this note, this Human Space Flight Center becomes critical for the experiments to be conducted for this Gaganyaan manned mission to space. Since this news also mentioned about Chandrayaan 2, let's go in briefly about the basic facts with respect to Chandrayaan 2. It says that Chandrayaan 2 is India's second mission to moon and it is a totally indigenous mission comprising of an orbiter, lander and a rover. So this Chandrayaan 2 mission comprises of an orbiter, lander and a rover. It then says that after reaching the 100-kilometer lunar orbit, lander housing the rover will separate from the orbiter. And after a controlled descent, the lander will soft land on the lunar surface at a specified site and deploy a rover. It then says that the mission will carry a six-wheeled rover which will move around in the landing site in semi-autonomous mode as decided by the ground commands. Further, the instruments on rover will observe the lunar surface and send back data for analysis of the lunar soil. The Chandrayaan 2 mission will collect scientific information on lunar topography, mineralogy, element abundance, lunar exosphere, and signatures of hydroxyl and water ice. Hence, all these facts with respect to Chandrayaan 2 missions becomes extremely important from our upcoming prelims examination. So in this news analysis, we understood about Gaganyaan mission, Human Space Flight Center, and also about the Chandrayaan 2 mission of Indian Space Research Organization. So this topic becomes extremely important from our upcoming examination perspective, both pre as well as mains. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 18. It says antibiotic resistant NDM1 gene found in pristine Arctic. Scientists are surprised by the detection of this NDM1 gene. The gene was first isolated in India and now has been found in one of the Earth's most remote spots, that is, in the Arctics. So, as per the news, the recent detection of antibiotic resistant gene NDM1 in the Arctic region indicates globalization of antimicrobial resistance. The research was conducted in the high Arctic zone, and scientists were surprised to find a robust presence of this NDM1 gene in that area. Further, scientists' findings also show that NDM1 gene is present in highest concentrations near freshwater sources. Further in the research, scientists have also discovered levels of mobile genetic elements. Now this topic on NDM1 gene found in Arctic region in your prelims examination forms a part of general science, and in your mains get covers under GS paper 3 under technology as well as under environment. Now NDM1 stands for New Delhi Metallolactamase, and this NDM1 is a superbug which has become resistant to most of the strongest antibiotic drugs. Now the term superbug is generally used to describe organisms resistant to usually two or more antibiotics which are usually effective. So bacteria containing NDM1 are almost resistant to most of the antibiotics. Thus bacteria with NDM1 have been termed as superbug. Now Klebsiella were the first bacteria identified to produce NDM1 in a patient. On this note, let us understand about antibiotic resistance. It says that most antibiotics are produced by soil microorganisms, and over the time they become resistant to the compounds that they excrete to survive. The antibiotics kills the bacteria by targeting specific cells. However, when taken in unreasonable or partial dose, these bacteria might mutate and the target cells gets modified. So unreasonable or partial usage of these antibiotics helps these cells to either mutate or they get partially modified, and through this mutation or partial modification these cells becomes resistant to these antibiotics. So over a period of time, impartial or unreasonable use of these antibiotics has resulted in creation of these antibiotics resistant bacteria. So the available antibiotic medicine has become ineffective and a higher dose of such antibiotics are required to kill the bacteria. So this is how antibiotic resistance has developed because of unreasonable or partial uses of antibiotics. Now the government of India has recognized this issue of antimicrobial resistance, and to tackle this issue the government had launched the National Program on Containment of Antimicrobial Resistance under the 12th 5-year plan of 2012 to 2017. The main objectives of this program were to establish a laboratory-based antimicrobial resistance surveillance system of 30 network labs in India, and to generate quality data on antimicrobial resistance for pathogens of public health importance. Further, to strengthen infection control guidelines and practices, and also to promote rational use of antibiotics by the patients. And finally, to generate awareness among healthcare providers and also in the community about the rational use of these antibiotics. The government then launched the National Action Plan to combat antimicrobial resistance 2017 to 2021, and this resulted in Delhi Declaration that was adopted in the year 2017. The purpose of Delhi Declaration was to improve awareness and understanding of antimicrobial resistance through effective communication, education, as well as training, to strengthen knowledge and evidence through surveillance, reduce the incidence of infection through effective infection prevention and control, optimize the use of antimicrobial agents in health, animals, as well as food, promote investments for antimicrobial resistant activities, research, and innovations, and to strengthen India's leadership on antimicrobial resistance. So, these can be said to be the objectives of Delhi Declaration, which was adopted in 2017 to combat antimicrobial resistance. Other measures taken by the government to combat antimicrobial resistance includes the following. The government in this aspect has enacted various regulations, one of which is that the Schedule H drug can only be sold with a prescription by registered medical practitioner in India. So, any Schedule H drug cannot be purchased from a medicine shop without a proper prescription given by the doctor. Now, drugs has been categorized into schedules as per the Drugs and Cosmetic Rules 1945, framed under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. So, Schedule H drugs cannot be sold without doctor's prescription. Further, the Indian Council of Medical Research has established a national network on surveillance of antimicrobial resistance in laboratories called Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance Research Network, that is AMRSN. Further, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has also started the Red Line campaign to spread awareness against excessive use of antibiotics and also against selling of such antibiotics without doctor's prescription. Further, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has also notified three governance mechanisms towards antimicrobial resistance control, namely an intersectoral coordination committee, a technical advisory group, and a core working group on antimicrobial resistance. So, these are some of the measures taken by the government to combat antimicrobial resistance. Thus, this concept of NDM1 gene becomes very important from our prelims perspective as questions may be asked in the upcoming prelims examination. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 8. It says the lowdown on the MFN status, that is, most favored nation. So, this news highlights that after the terror attack in Pulwama district, the government of India has revoked the MFN status according to Pakistan in 1996. Now, in your prelims examination, this topic of MFN status forms a part of Indian economy. So, as per the WTO rules, countries cannot generally discriminate between their trading partners. So, if country A has accorded or granted certain trade concessions to country B, then such trade concessions must also be granted to other countries who are members of WTO. So, if a country A has granted certain trade concessions to country B, then such trade concessions must also be granted to other WTO member countries, for example, say C, D, E, or X. So, if country A lowers import duty for country B, then similarly, such import duty must also be lowered for D, C, E, and X, and also other members of WTO. So, this principle is known as the most favored nation treatment. So, revoking this MFN status from Pakistan means that Government of India can now levy any import duty as per its will on such goods and services originating from Pakistan. So, revocation of MFN status from Pakistan will mean that this will make very expensive for the government of Pakistan to export goods and services to India. However, the news says that the scale of the impact is questionable as India's total trade with Pakistan stood at $2.4 billion in 2017-18, out of which import from Pakistan was worth $488.56 million. So, as per the total trade, we export more to Pakistan than what we import from Pakistan. Now, another important aspects to be noted from a prelims perspective is that the concept of most favored nation can be found in General Agreements on Tariff and Trade, that is GATT, General Agreements on Trade in Services, that is GATS, and also in TRIPS, that is Agreement on Trade Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. So these are some of the important aspects to be remembered from our prelims point of view. Now, this particular question was asked in the prelims of 2015. The question was the terms agreement on agriculture, agreement on the application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and peace clause appear in the news frequently in the context of the affairs of the options were Food and Agricultural Organization, United Nations Framework Conference on Climate Change, World Trade Organization, and United Nations Environment Program. So, in this, the correct answer was C, that is World Trade Organization. So we see that questions on WTO and various agreements have been asked previously by UPSC. So on this note, the concept of MFN becomes extremely important from our prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. Now the next news appears on page number 5 in the brief section. It says that section 66A, Supreme Court asks states to sensitize cops. So, in this news, the Supreme Court of India has directed all states to sensitize their police personnel with respect to the verdict given in March 2015 in the very important case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. As per the verdict, the Supreme Court had scrapped Section 66A of the Information Technology Act 2000 and had declared it as unconstitutional. So, in this note, the Supreme Court has asked the states to make their police personnel aware about this particular case, that is Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, so that the people are not arrested under this draconian provision which already has been declared as unconstitutional by the Honorable Court. Further, the Supreme Court has asked all high courts to send a copy of this particular judgment to all trial courts in the country. So this topic of Section 66A of Information Technology Act, which has been declared as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in the case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, forms a part of Indian polity and governance in your prelims examination. Now, the Supreme Court declared Section 66A of Information Technology Act as unconstitutional as it was violative of freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a). So, on this note, let us also understand what were the provisions of Section 66A of the Information Technology Act. It says that any person who sends by means of computer resource or a communication device any information that is grossly offensive or has menacing character, or any information which he knows to be false but for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, insult, injury, criminal intimidation, enmity, hatred, or ill will, persistently by making use of such computer resources or a communication device, and any electronic mail or electronic mail message for the purpose of causing annoyance or inconvenience, or to deceive or to mislead the addressee or recipient about the origin of such messages. So, any person guilty of such offences shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years along with fine. So, this provision of the Information Technology Act gave huge powers to the state and central government to impose restriction on free speech of people, and also allowed the state for imprisonment of such people who express their view according to the government might find offensive. So on this note, the Supreme Court of India declared this provision of Information Technology Act as unconstitutional as it was violative of freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a). So in this news, you must know about Shreya Singhal case as well as the fact that Section 66A of Information Technology Act has been declared as unconstitutional. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 11. The news reads, Merchandise trade deficit widens to $14.73 billion in January because of surge in import of silver as well as gold. Now, this topic of merchandise trade forms a part of Indian economy in your prelims examination. Merchandise trade deficit is basically a difference between export and import, where there is greater import as compared to export. So this says that the merchandise trade balance is the difference in value between imported and exported goods. And as you can also see in this news, that it says that because of import surge of silver and gold, the merchandise trade deficit has widened to roughly $15 billion in January. So basically, if the merchandise trade balance is in positive, it means that we have more export as compared to import. So it says a positive number for merchandise trade balance indicates surplus, that is greater export, meaning that more goods were exported than imported. And vice versa, that is, if the merchandise trade balance is negative, then it means there have been greater import as compared to export. And this difference in merchandise trade deficit or merchandise trade surplus is a gauge of economic trends or performance. Further, it says that these trade figures can directly impact all financial markets and can also affect currency values in foreign exchange markets. Now, another important aspect to be noted from prelims perspective is that merchandise trade statistics are compiled and published by the Directorate General of Commercial Intelligence and Statistics, and this comes under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So, this becomes an extremely important point from your prelims perspective. And the Directorate General of Commercial Intelligence Statistics collects, compiles, and disseminates India's trade statistics and commercial information. So, in this news analysis, you must understand about the merchandise trade balance, that if the merchandise trade balance is in positive, then it means more export, and if it is in negative, then it means more import. Now, these are your practice questions after our discussion. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds and then we'll discuss both these questions. First, it says consider the following statements. 1. The Central Information Commissioner shall be appointed by the President on the recommendations of a committee headed by the Prime Minister. Yes, this statement is correct. Second, the Central Information Commissioner shall hold office for a term of 6 years or till he or she attains the age of 65 years. No, this statement is incorrect. As you can see that every Information Commissioner shall hold office for a term of 5 years from the date on which he enters his office or till he attains the age of 65 years. So this statement mentioning about 6 years is incorrect. So in this, A is our correct answer. The second question says, consider the following statements about Gaganyaan. First, it is India's first manned mission to space. Yes, this is correct. Second, GSK Mk3 will be used to launch Gaganyaan. Yes, this is also correct. Third, Human Space Flight Center shall be responsible for the implementation of Gaganyaan project. Yes, this is also correct. So in this, D is a correct answer. Now these two forms your the other practice questions. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. The question says, the provision of most favored nation can be found in which of the following? First, general agreements on tariff and trade. Second, general agreements on trade and services. Third, agreement on trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. We have seen in our analysis that all the three statements are correct. So in this, D is the correct answer. Moving to question number 4, it says, consider the following statements. First, positive merchandise trade balance indicates greater import. No, positive merchandise trade balance indicates greater export and not greater import. Second, negative merchandise trade balance indicates greater export. Again, this statement is incorrect as negative merchandise trade balance indicates. So in this, both statements are incorrect. So here, D is the correct answer. Now this article titled Heralding a New Dawn talks about the Indian and Saudi Arabia relationship. It says that India and Saudi Arabia are poised to dramatically deepen the bilateral relationship. The India and Saudi Arabia relationship has been comprehensively covered in DNS dated 14th February 2019 by Mehak Ma'am. In the PDF, you can find all the important aspects related to India and Saudi Arabia relationship. So to understand India-Saudi relationships in comprehensive detail, please go through this video of Mehak Ma'am dated 14th February 2019. And further, to read the text, you can download the PDF dated 14th Feb 2019. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.